All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Vicki Fenwick-Judy. I'm the Executive Director of Experience Learning. We're a nonprofit organization located in the mountains of West Virginia. We have two campuses, but our main campus that we use for educational programming is located at the very top of the Chesapeake Bay watershed at the highest point in West Virginia. We have a 460-acre campus that's surrounded by thousands of acres of national forest. So we have quite the playground and classroom, if you will, to explore and to introduce to kids and adults alike. I'm going to give there's been a little bit of change in the schedule. So I'm going to give everybody, I'm going to let Melinda introduce herself. But then if you see, can everybody see my screen with the PowerPoint that says unplugging? Okay. And if you would, just in the chat box, while we're waiting just a few more minutes to let people join, put your name, your location, and whatever your role is in education down there, just so I get a sense of who's in our session and kind of what your perspective is or where you're coming from, even in this session or in this conference. And then in just a minute or two, we'll get started. Melinda, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself now or not.
Sure. Hi, my name is Melinda, and I am the program manager here at Experience Learning. I largely work with teachers and administrators to help build unique outdoor experiences for their students. We tailor each program to the needs of our school so they can look vastly different depending on specific focus. We have a lot of schools coming to us so they can dig deeper into specific scientific content, but we also see a lot of schools that are most excited about the social, emotional learning that's taking place in the programs. So those will tend to focus more on group bonding, collaboration, participation, stewardship, things like that.
All right, it looks like that most people have had a chance to enter and to share with us. We have a wide-reaching geographic location as well as professions in the world of education join us today. So that'll be fun, and maybe we can get some interesting perspectives from all the different types of audiences. So earlier in the conference, there we go. We've been already talking a lot today about how we can strengthen our communities to build a more thriving world. When we started talking about this as presenters and collaborating with CWI and the other presenters here, I found that to be a pretty interesting conversation. It's where I live in West Virginia. It's a topic of conversation, maybe not put in so many words, but we're definitely a state and a region that is plagued with lots of challenges, both economic, education-wise, drug crises. So it's, there are a lot of people around me that work on building stronger communities, and I think education personally is central to that conversation. But I just wanted to get some of your all's thoughts, and just in a word or two, and I have been reading some of the things that were on the Padlets earlier, but if you can either say it out loud, or if you want to just type something in the chat room of what do you think are key components of strengthening communities through the lens of education, like either as your role in nonprofit, after school teaching. Just if you want to share one or two things, I'm kind of taking notes and trying to pull that in to our conversation.
I think diverse perspectives, both being exposed to them and learning how to listen and respect without necessarily agreeing.
Yeah, I noticed, I was thinking about that when Darren Early was speaking earlier. He talked about that we all come from different sets of values or religions or political views. And I mean, I can say that that's not always easy to teach or to listen and appreciate those different values, but I do think it can make a community or any group of individuals stronger whenever you have that ability. I see over here, nurturing space for everyone, connection, inclusion, and equal opportunities, feeling of belonging and community. I was advocacy, one of the keeping community, family connected, learning to respect natural assets of communities. So a few things that I, in between sessions, I actually went to some of the Padlets to look at the first task we had about writing down the, what does it mean to you to be thriving? And there were several common themes, and I just took a few excerpts from that. A big theme, and what we're seeing too right here, what you guys are finding or writing, or about common spaces, belonging, sense of community. One of them said, experiencing joy even from accomplishing a hard task. And as I'm sharing these things, it's going to relate to where we go next with information about experience learning and how we develop our programs. Reaching and exceeding your potential, making the best out of every situation, strong relationships, experience in the world around us, making meaningful connections and feeling connected, support of others, that thriving is more of a communal aspect than it is from an individual. And even from the first session that I was sitting in on, they talked a lot about connection being, how people connect is very cultural depending on how it moves from place to place. And so when I started thinking about this and thought about the work that we do, I came back to kind of our key philosophy. So in a minute, we'll be looking at a video of that gives you a better kind of holistic picture of our programming and our philosophy. But several years ago, we took the time, well, just for a tad bit of background, we've actually been around for 45 years. We were founded in the early 70s right here on this campus where you see this picture from. We've gone through several different name changes over the years and structural changes. And so just a few years ago, we went through another pretty significant organizational change, and we changed our name, and now we're Experience Learning. And that gave us an opportunity to really dig deep into what our philosophy was and how we wanted to develop programs and how we wanted to exist within the world. And we really started thinking about it. We first started with a vision of thinking about what, you know, how do we view the world and what is our role in that world? And we really think that to have thriving communities, we need to be able to have citizens that are competent, confident, and are able and willing to participate. So we started breaking that down and thinking, how do we make sure that we're infusing those elements into our programs? And what do we really mean by that? So from a competence standpoint, that's really about understanding the world around us. And that's being able to understand how do we, you know, I'm watching the world unfold right now, unfortunately, on social media, and just the lack or not taking the time to really actually find out information, real information. So how do we teach kids to be competent and either have knowledge, or how do they access knowledge? How do we build their ability to understand the world around them and find good information in order to make a decision, rather that is a decision based on what they're going to have for lunch, or rather that's a decision of who they're going to vote for, or a decision on how they're going to communicate with somebody they disagree with. So how do we infuse competence into our programming and into students? Another aspect of that is the confidence. A lot of times having that information or that ability isn't enough. We need to make sure that people have the confidence to show up and participate. They need to know how, a big piece of that is they need to know how to communicate. How do you have the confidence to communicate with somebody you disagree with? How do you work as a team in order to accomplish a task that is very difficult? How do you find joy in that difficult task? And then the third part was the participation. And so having information and having confidence in order to do something is only two legs of the stool. But the third leg is you have to show up and you have to participate. I think that we face a lot of issues in the world, and when we wrote this, we never envisioned that we'd be facing a pandemic like we are right now. But we need people to show up and participate, whether it's a small group trying to navigate their way to the top of a mountain, if it's in a community who's facing challenges with economics or education, or if it's in a classroom or an after-school program where we're making a decision together to implement an activity or whatever that is. These three things together, when we put those together, that's where we feel like we can build a good program around that. We also, the kind of the glue that holds those three pieces together is that we do a lot of reflective activities and debriefing of the activities so that the experience they have in one location can transfer into their home life, their school life, or wherever that is. As we transitioned into experience learning, we had the awesome opportunity of working with somebody who developed a video about our programs and about our institution. And we're just going to take a few minutes to share that with you. I'm going to switch sharing my screen over to Melinda, who's going to share the video with you guys. Hey, Mel, does anybody else hear that? Is there sound?
No.
Okay. Hold on just a second then. Mel, I think when you share your screen, you have to share it. There's a little button at the bottom left that says share with sound. Let me see.
There. All right.
Experience learning is a really unique place.
We good?
The experience that kids get here is something that will forever influence the way they learn into the future.
Well, you know, when you make the drive in here and you start going up all of these rolling hills and you start to see all of the trees that have been windswept to one side, as you approach, it starts to feel like home. And then once you're here and chatting with the people who you've gotten to know through your time here, it just really cements that feeling.
The thing that makes us unique is that we traffic in authentic experiences. We don't do contrived games and activities and ropes courses and things like that. We take people out and have actual experiences. We go have adventures, and by front-loading those experiences and by following up on them and processing them, we allow kids to take those experiences and then apply that back to their home lives.
It's a place to experience where you come and you feel the wind, you see the way the weather shifts, you see the way the night falls, and it is a really full-fledged immersion in the natural environment.
I think by being in these small groups and being outside of the mainstream, we're encouraging people to see each other as people. So that's breaking down barriers. It's reducing the gap and chasm between people in a world that is increasingly divided. And I think that that's critical.
You never stop being surprised by the capacity that this place has to impact you in different ways.
I think my favorite thing I've done here was push myself and challenge myself.
It's become a lifelong experience for me, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And when I say I love this place, without the people, it really wouldn't be half as much.
As a parent, as an educator, as an administrator, this is the kind of experience that I would want my kid to have, and that I think every parent would.
So let me get back to here. Okay. So as, trying to find my chat box. Okay. When I share my screen, things happen that a lot of stuff goes away. So hopefully that video gave you guys a little bit of an idea of kind of how we operate and what our programming looks like. So when the pandemic hit and everything started shutting down, we do a lot of school groups. So we work with, during the school year, we do everything from 3 to 5 to 8 day backpacking and wilderness expeditions with schools to 1-day stream studies, field trips to local maple sugar farms, and getting kids out of the classroom and learning about the world around them. And so when this pandemic hit, obviously schools, all of our courses eventually within a week's time basically had shut down. And so there we sat and thought, how are we relevant right now in the world? What do we do? Because obviously those experiences that you just saw, those vistas and the vista that you see right here in front of you, we aren't able to offer those kind of programs right now to kids. And we still are looking at a future where we're not sure, even as our state and opens up somewhat and as guidelines are being put forth right now on what we can do, we're not sure what we should do as far as getting kids together. There was a conversation earlier about hiking with kids and you know, typically in the summer, we have a full schedule of summer camps where we have kids riding in vans together and sleeping in tents together. And all those things are probably not going to happen this summer. And so we really tried to search and find a way to make sure that we were relevant. And how do we also just continue the partnerships that we have started with schools that we've been working with, in some cases for 30 plus years. So we kind of gathered all that information and thought, how do we take our philosophy and practices for the past 45 years and put that into some type of virtual model? At the same time, we were really looking at what was happening around mostly our region and thought, what are the challenges that our people are facing, teachers are facing with virtual learning? And before we get into what we've kind of come up with, I wanted to hear from you guys, given that we are from all over the US at this point in this group right now. What are some of the challenges that you all were facing as you were trying to move your classrooms or your programs into a virtual setting? You can either feel free to use the chat room or just unmute yourself and speak up.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm Juliana Ostrovsky. I'm a teaching artist, community arts educator for various institutions. I'm also a presenter. So, and some of my challenges are basically, you know, just because for a lot of institutions who I usually program with, have to invent formats that they have not, just like you guys, they have not experienced. And so my challenge is that my institutions are kind of, sorry, putting that on me to develop the structure. And, you know, so I'm doing it, but it'd be really great to have some kind of uniformity to structure, you know, something that works for everybody, that provides like specialist content like the nature conservancies and museums, etc. That's my biggest challenge.
I'm not logging. I have to see. I'm going through reading some of these and writing down some notes because these were, I mean, and these are very similar to the things that we were hearing. And to be honest, it took us it took us probably 2 weeks of going through different kinds of iterations of things that we wanted to do till we kind of landed on this 5E model that Melinda's going to talk to you about. One of the big ones that I'm seeing in the chat, and I'm assuming you guys are reading too, is that just a lot of the, around where we are, there's huge issues with internet access. Someone else earlier had written even the lack of interactivity within these lessons. Somebody earlier also was talking about that there's a lack of materials at home. I think there's also a lack of support at home potentially. Some of the things we were hearing from our local teachers were that, you know, they were getting emails from parents at 9 o'clock at night because parents were trying to work during the day, then go home and help their kids access some of the materials from either Zoom meetings or from their online portals, however they were getting that. I think that in a lot of areas in the US, I know here somebody there is mentioning hotspots. And I think that that was one of the solutions here, but I also can imagine how hard it would be to sit and try to do schoolwork potentially in a car or somewhere sitting in a parking lot that trying to access that hotspot just to even get their lessons. Life went on, and so yeah, there's just a lack of engagement and a lack of interaction too. So those are actually, and you can see that maybe in the list over there, in the model that we kind of developed. The other thing I will say as a parent, so I have a 10th grader and a 6th grader, so I was, not only am I working, but I'm watching my kids' lessons unfold. And I also wanted to have them get up and off the computer a bit, where we did not have necessarily the ability to have like online classrooms in our school system around here, but there was still a lot of work being done. And so I was watching my kids spend just hours sitting on a computer trying to go through their homework and do different things. So as a parent, I wanted a little bit of learning to take place off of the computer. And the other thing that we did when we designed these was try to make them, you could use additional technology tools like something like Padlet or everything, but you can also use these lessons in a very offline way. So I'm going to have Mel, I'm going to switch it over to Mel and let her talk to you a little bit about the 5E model that we modified and how we came up with, or some of the aspects of that.
Sure. So these realities that we've all been talking about have led us towards developing these at-home lessons where observation and exploration are the driving forces. So then it really does make a lot of sense to get the kids outside to complete a lesson. Our hope here is to engage the students in problem solving, critical thinking while they're out exploring, because it's not necessarily about having the right answer on a worksheet. It is more about the process, the experience that's led them towards that answer. So these philosophies have always been cornerstones in our traditional in-person programming. So we tried to figure out a way to infuse it into the virtual world. The 5E model that you're looking at right here seemed to be a good fit because the explore section was key to getting them outside, and the explain and extend sections got them thinking more deeply about the observations that they made in the world around them. And then we also added our own touch to the evaluate section, thinking about it more as an opportunity to reflect and to transfer their observations to everyday life. An important part of our wilderness-based programming, our field programs, is for it not to just be this one standalone experience. We want a takeaway to be a feeling of increased confidence, to keep getting outside, adventuring no matter the scale. Could be small backyard stuff, could be going on a big mountain adventure. But the reality is that you cannot recreate a truly wild experience virtually. And so these worksheets, we hope, is just one way we can help to kind of plant that seed.
So I am, so we are going to go, does anybody have any questions so far or thoughts that they want to share before we move on? Has anybody ever used the 5E model in instruction? It's a popular like science framework for developing lessons.
I have a question, Vicki.
Sure.
As to whether you've had any parents that have been resistant or reluctant about their kids going outside to explore?
No, so the way we have implemented this thus far is that we put these out and about, and before we get off here, I'll show you guys where to access some of the lessons that we've developed, or all the lessons that we've developed, and we have a few more coming online in the near future. And we sent them out largely to the schools that we had already partnered with, and to other education channels, to our West Virginia Science Teachers Association, to some other kind of avenues through that. We had hoped to work more directly with schools and kind of implementing those. I did see them implemented in several different ways. A lot of time, well, I think the most common way they were implemented was just they were sent out and the students were to complete the student worksheets largely on their own. Right before the end of the year, in the county where I live, our school has already ended. They ended at the end of last week. I think largely there was a huge lack of participation, which I've seen a few people mention in the chat rooms. And there's a whole thing, and I think this is happening in many places, about how to grade and how to fairly, grade these lessons when there is such a lack of equity among how people were implementing those. So we have also implemented them with a classroom where we would hold a virtual meeting, go through one aspect of it. The next day, the kids had kind of a homework to do where they would go out and do one of the exploration part, then we come together and talk about it. So we did that, and I think a few people were talking about this earlier, I think in lack of the other programming that we're able to offer right now, we are going to host a virtual kind of day camp, like an Explorers Club, where we piece a few of our lessons together, and we'll look at that in just a second. Some of our lessons could be scaffolded or pieced together, kind of packaged together in a different way, depending on what your goals were for your program. Ellen lives close by and works in the next county over. Do you want to share your experience, Ellen? Do you mind?
Okay. Yeah, I have struggled with my students because they're special education students and the parents are overwhelmed with trying to teach them with the reading and the writing, and I ended up with a caseload of all boys this year. And so they're very hands-on, they're very outdoors. And so when Vicki had shared this, I thought, oh, thank goodness, finally something that they can connect to, because I've sent out articles about fishing and things like that, but it's still reading, writing, and it's still on the computer, and my kids do not want to be on technology. And so when we sent it out, I kind of explained it in a video that they could watch independently on the Teams, which is what all of our kids have, and then sent it out to the parents. And then I also had paper copies that they could pick up from school if they wanted to. And because my students struggle with reading and writing, there was not the writing portion of it required. They could answer me or have their parents answer me or send me videos of what they thought of it. But they just talked about how much fun they had going out and getting dirty, and they were allowed to go out and look for worms and look for different things and take pictures of stuff that they liked. And half of my boys thought, oh, it was a great way to find worms and learn about where they are, because then they use them for fishing. But the after chat, I actually had 5 students participate, which was up from 2 or 3 week after week, but they finally had something they felt connected to talk about. So it was really nice to see them involved and to feel like going out and playing in the dirt was still school. They kind of could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And the parents messaged me that they were so thankful to get them off of the computers.
Oh, awesome. That's great. I think I neglected the first question, and Charlene, I'm not sure if that was you, asked it about if parents had any reservations about sending their kids outside. I will say where we are, that I don't think that that's as much of an issue. We're in a very rural area. At the first conference, you know, it was a challenge that I had not thought of, to be honest, before. In one of the sessions I was in, we were talking about challenges, and somebody in a highly populated area was talking about kids trying to get outside safely during a quarantine, living in inner city in an apartment building. And so I do think that that's a challenge that we don't see here quite as much. It's very often here that in a rural setting that parents are very happy to do that. One thing that we had kind of thought of when we did develop this a little bit is that it can provide an opportunity for families to also connect in a way. Ideally, in some of those situations, if parents have time, but I know that's a whole nother kind of set of challenges for working families right now, is for families or other siblings to also connect and join in the exploration outside with them. So it's definitely not a perfect answer to that, but that was kind of our thought process or our goal for that. Does anybody else have any questions at this point? I'm going to show you one of our lessons so you guys can just see kind of what that looks like, and we can go through how it could be implemented. And then if we have time at the end, which I think we will, we're going to get up off of our hind ends also. So I'm just going to share my whole screen. So on our website, so here's our website, experience-learning.org. We have a learn page, and it gives you all of our different programs. We have a virtual learning lessons. Everybody can see that okay? Yes? Okay. And on here right now, we have, I think, 5 different activities. Map and Compass lets kids explore their own backyard and develop a map. Ellen spoke of the decomposers, where you're going out and investigating your yard, trying to find signs of decomposition and how that works. A build your own journal. This drawing conclusions incorporates art and science. And then the Dichomous Key, which is what we're going to go over. We have some things coming online that'll be an introduction to trees, photosynthesis, and I think we're going to have some other ones about, we have a maple program, so we're doing a few that are a tour of a maple syrup production farm, and and some other ones that are specific to maple, to learning about maple. But when you go, so if you click on this, if you click here to access the free lesson plans, it's just going to take you to another place where you can choose all of them. And you do have to kind of check out, but they're all free. You should not have to enter any kind of information in there. So when you download that, what you will end up with is you'll end up with a teacher guide, which is just a Word document, and the student worksheet. And so in the teacher guide, there's some outcomes, there's a list of materials you might need, and then each of these sections is broken down. Some of them, if you can host a virtual lesson or a Zoom chat or however you guys are holding those, it's great, and we give some background information here. We try to include like questions that you can use to instill some inquiry in your students. We break down each section and provide any background information that you might need. And then the other piece, which I think is more valuable, or the most valuable, is the student worksheet. And so like Ellen said, I think some teachers, we think, just emailed these out and said, here, complete these and turn them back in. And then in other classrooms, they facilitated that through either 1 or 2 or a series of online meetings. So the sections are labeled. So you have your engage section that matches your teacher worksheet. And in this one, we were really trying to get kids to go and explore just their backyard, a local park that they had access to, something in the natural world. But we really did try to also kind of look at what kind of standards are being taught at this kind of upper elementary, maybe middle school grade level. I'm kind of laughing because in my first session, there was also an activity that used a Venn diagram. So it must be a popular way to display information. So we really started trying to get the kids to understand the skill of observation. So what kind of characteristics can we find about an item, and start to list those and compare those. So we use something that we hope kids are very familiar with, like a cantaloupe and a watermelon, and just started getting kids to understand the skill of observation. How do we observe things? How do we talk about something? Even if it's something we know, what are the key characteristics of an item? And had them list them there. So then this explore part is where they took time to go outside and really just find cool things around them. Right now we say to do it for 10 minutes. Of course, you could do it for longer, you could do it for shorter, however you would want to, but we wanted them to find things just in their own backyard, their own neighborhood, that they thought that were really cool. That could have been something in nature, something not in nature, whatever was around there that they thought was cool. And then we have them complete this worksheet. Some of that is, some kids like to draw to express interest. Some people like to write. We were asking them to do both of those. I can share with you one that we had that was completed. So here's a completed one of something that was these 5 things that were found, and a 6th thing, I guess, they added into there, and then really tried to encourage the use of descriptive words to identify what these things were. How do we make observations and identify these interesting things about whatever was found? And so that leads us into really the explain section and why we're here. And interestingly enough, I one time led an activity like this with a group of adults for a professional development workshop. And the workshop, though, was how to use technology in nature. And so we really set it up as like a coding in nature, because the dichotomous keys, if you're not familiar with them, they're an either or, an if then kind of setup. So something is or isn't something. And so you can create flow charts or guides that help you identify a species in nature. But it's a similar thinking to the idea of coding. And so it could be used in combination with that as well. But one of the other things we tried to do is pull in vocabulary words. And one of the, interestingly, after we did this, so I was kind of excited, I was looking through 4th and 5th grade standards in West Virginia, and one of the language standards was using Greek and Latin prefixes and root words. And so I was excited to see we had done that. But the one thing that we did embed in here, we tried to make it as, we didn't want it to depend too much on internet access. So we tried to provide some background information, but we also did include videos because it was hard to, there are just some really great videos out there, instructional videos out there that helped us explain something. And so here's a video that describes, that better teaches about what a dichotomous key is and how to use it. And then we gave kids an opportunity to try a dichotomous key that was already designed. So to use a dichotomous key, you would start with your first object and start at number 1. And then there's either 2 options. The track has 5 toes or the track has less than 5 toes. And from here you would move on and be able to identify each of those several tracks that we have there. And so this is one way that people use a dichotomous key, and here is the second way. You can also have them more as, like I said, almost like a flow chart. But then in their extend, we really wanted to take this idea that they had a chance to understand the information of what a dichotomous key is and how to use it. But we took it up a notch to the extend section, and they are going to create their own dichotomous key. This was not that easy of a task. And I will tell you this, whoever this lady is, I need to email her, that created this video. It was fantastic. She develops a dichotomous key just using 5 things that you can find around your household. But we asked kids to come back to this worksheet or this. So in this lesson, we've asked kids to take these things and we're going to group those and they're going to make a dichotomous key. And this particular video actually walks you through step by step. So you can pause the video and try to organize your thoughts in the same way that she's organized her thoughts with her example. And so what I was surprised at was the finished product. So from that other image of from these items, this student took and made a dichotomous key of their objects in nature. And so she went back to these identifying characteristics and looked at these words and started trying to group them and find things that were common and find things that were different. And so does her 5 objects, if they have green or if they do not have green, does not have green, it's a rock. If it has green, then it has to come down into 2 more categories. It has a stem or it doesn't have a stem. So this dichotomous key was only made for the things that she found in nature. So she went through the whole activity and came up with this. This is a 6th grader, and came up with all of these kind of these topics on her own, really using that the first worksheet that she completed. And then she went through and also created the second, a different type of dichotomous key. I will say if you're working with younger students, this one in the top, I think is a little easier to develop, at least initially. It's just the formatting of this makes it a tad bit more difficult. And so through this, we had virtual classroom, Zoom classroom meetings to introduce the topic. And then after they completed this, and I guess actually even after they completed their own dichotomous key, and so they could draw that here. And then we, as Melinda said earlier, we try to tie in a reflection piece to think, well, how does what I find in nature, how does my observation in nature, how could it possibly relate to something in my everyday life? Those range from in our map and compass activity, it talks about goal setting and how you can create a map to achieve your own goal. To here, it's like, how could we use this kind of if-then thinking to decide something like what you are going to do on a day. My daughter filled this out and basically every square became jump on the trampoline. And so no matter what, she was going to jump on the trampoline. And then we've included a section at the end again, trying to tie back into some kind of potential English standards or language standards with vocabulary. Some of our worksheets have more vocabulary than others. So does anybody have any questions about that lesson or how our lessons are structured or how to access our lessons? No. So we are, as I said, we are available, or we are planning on, I think, trying, we've never done anything like this, but trying to do a virtual kind of day camp or explorers club. At the beginning of this session, I heard people talking about, somebody was talking about that they were being charged with doing a summer school program where kids would be sitting down from 10 to 2, or at least based at a computer to 10 to 2. I think some of these could work quite well because you could introduce the session and then let kids go do a part away from the computer and come back. The same thing, I think maybe it was Janice was talking about, you work with a nature explorations and you're trying to figure out how do you get kids off screen and actually kind of set up explorations that they can do at home. Hopefully, there's something in some of those activities that you could do. I guess I'm gonna just type my email in, and Mel, if you wanna do the same. If you guys have any questions at all about implementing these or how to access those, is that right? Experience learning. How to access these, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to brainstorm with you how to do that. Or if you have any ideas or feedback, we are not afraid to hear feedback and constructive criticism, how to make them better, how they might work for you.
If you can see, there's a window right behind me. I live in northern Vermont, about 10 miles from the Canadian border. And there are railroad tracks right down the street from me. It's on the edge of a small to moderate sized village. And I have noticed over the past 3 weeks or so, there are a pair of ospreys which have built a nest on a communication tower right by the edge of the railroad tracks. And ospreys are not unusual. I live about 2 miles from Lake Champlain, very large lake, but they're nowhere near water, and darned if they don't seem to be bothered by that, but they're there and they appear to be raising young. So I can sit, when I get too stressed by this constant on here, I just go look out the window watching them fly back and forth. It's pretty cool. It kind of grounds me.
That is very cool. And I have to say, I noticed you were from St. Albans, and I've spent some time up there. We actually did, we head up that way every year for a vacation. So maybe someday we'll have to touch about that. Yeah. I have this year I've seen 2 birds in our yard that I had not seen through here before. So that, and I'm not really like a bird watcher, but it was pretty cool to see that. One other cool observation I'll make, because my 6th grader had to be a guinea pig on some of these activities. And when she was collecting things, I don't even know the name of the moss, but there is a moss, at least it's here, that has little red things that stick up with little balls on the end almost. I mean, like we're talking about microscopic, but I wish I had a picture of it. But interestingly, it looks very much like the photo of the COVID-19 like image that they keep using of that virus. And that was wildly, that was the very first thing when she said that, and we started making observations about it. She's like, this looks like the coronavirus. And I thought that was an interesting connection, at least.